What we've got today are three amazing leaders in their spaces talking about it's not just what is possible, but it's what people are actually doing to make things possible. There's a lot of things that we hear and see about on a day-to-day basis about, AI and quantum cryptography and better ways of managing things. And this is an amazing experience to hear and interact with the people that are actually making these things happen, actually bringing the future to today. So this program is it's funded by MBIE. It's been doing so for the last 3 years. And the three projects that we're hearing about today are from Waikato Uni, Massey University, and the University of Auckland as well. So the intent of this research program is to develop the cybersecurity capabilities in New Zealand and increase collaboration, not just with the universities here in New Zealand, but also with Australia and Australian partners and other universities and everything around. The outcome of all of this is obviously, to make real and material increases to the resilience of New Zealand. And so what we need to do with that, and one of the core purposes of the program, and certainly today, is to collaborate and to sort of bring the capabilities of the universities and the capabilities of this research with the actual real world, the benefits that you and I, business owners, and the community at large can, excuse me, can see. So one of the important things to remember with this is a lot of what you will see and experience today is obviously going to be quite academic. So we're in the early exploratory stages for a lot of things, but it's very, very important that there's industry engagement and very important linkages and understandings, both so that industry can make good decisions about technology and about what they're doing, but also so that the people that are involved in the research can form that up and to shape that. Not all of the projects and not all of the research outcomes might be applicable. And an example of that, and I hope this doesn't become applicable too soon, post-quantum cryptography isn't something that you would necessarily be deploying in your organization, in the next 6, 12 months, 2 years' time. There's obviously some very, very important sort of pointy questions around exactly what, what that means and what that could do. But, there are going to be some things that are very applicable now. And there's a wonderful discussion that will be had today around sort of, better ways of doing, managing your networks and configuration stuff and everything else. So those things are going to be, quite applicable to you now. What I think we can probably do now, I will go through and introduce our panelists. The first that we have coming up is Associate Professor Julian Jang-Jaccard, and Julian is going to be talking about AI for automating response to threats. Now, this is so incredibly topical and so incredibly important. And we've seen, even in the last 12 months, we've seen the tradecraft of threats accelerate extremely rapidly. And certainly if you look at the context of ransomware and the amount of money that is pouring into the ransomware crews around the world, they're able to take that, they're able to, invest in their own technology and invest in the ways that they attack organizations. So the growth of their innovation is quite significant. So having the ability to use AI to automate that response to these threats and everything else is pretty important. And so do you want to bring up your slides there, Julian? And I can hand it over to you.
All right. Can you confirm that you can see my slide?
Yep.
Okay, so am I ready to go? All right, Declan, thank you so much for the introductions. As Declan mentioned, I'm Julian. I'm an associate professor from Massey University, leading the cybersecurity lab. So I'm leading one of the 3 CSRP programs. It's titled AI for Automating Responses to Threats. So I'm going to give you next 10 minutes or so what this project is about and some concrete research work projects that we've been carrying out under this theme. So project overview. So the project, what this project is about. So this project is about utilizing the latest cutting edge advanced artificial intelligence technique to enhance the resilience of a cyber system against not only existing adversaries, but for also emerging the next generation of adversaries who are increasingly also using artificial embedded in their threat, in their attack mechanisms. So under this umbrella of this theme, that we are focusing on 3 research areas. So first is to improve and enhance our capabilities in threat detections. The second focus area is to propose a new kind of security assessment tool that can evaluate the trade-off between attacks and defense strategies, especially when AI is incorporated. Our third theme is to also enhance the resilience in our threat response that does not only understand the different threat categories, but also can formulate under the right threat categorization that can formulate the right set of response strategies. So in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about concrete details of what kind of work we carry on under these 3 focus areas. So in the first focus area of improving, enhancing our threat detection capability, we are looking at a number of different deep learning techniques to detect anomalies in network traffics and network intrusions. So before deep learning, so majority of the techniques that are used in the network intrusion is based on this technique called the principal feature analysis, PCA, that is used to extract the features for the analysis to conduct the analysis on network traffic. But because of underlying mechanisms of a PCA, unfortunately, this mechanism cannot cope with the data sets when data sets include large features and no longer suitable for a lot of network traffic that carry big data with the large features. And because the computation it does, the response is very slow, and therefore, if the network intrusions are transmitted through the ultra-fast broadband, such as 5G or 4G, then it can't cope. So the community has been looking at new kind of solutions that can remedy the limitations of a PCA, and deep learning approaches has been held as quite promising. So we've been looking at a number of different ones, and currently we've been focusing on autoencoder based anomaly detections. So one of the advantages of autoencoder is its capability that can very quickly extract relevant features, even if these features doesn't have linear relationships. And then using this dimensionality reduction that can quickly extract the features, it generates the outputs. And by looking at this reconstruction error, we can pinpoint whether a certain network is anomalous or normal. So we've been actually looking at how we can utilize this autoencoder as an anomaly detection mechanism for the traffic analysis. And as you see from this table in the result, the first line is our result, where it actually produces really good accuracy compared to all the traditional machine learning techniques, and even if a lot smaller training sample is used. So we've been working also, we verified that this is quite promising, and then we've been working with a number of industries, especially for our built environment, that they had a really large sensor data set, and then we applied our technique to find the anomalies in their sensor network. Also, we've been working with the Dunedin Hospital to find the defects in their chest X-ray, and then the result has been quite promising. And anomaly detection can apply in many different domains, in domains and many different industries. For example, we can find the fraud in financial and business transactions. We can find the structural defects, and also we can also analyze social media content to find a certain surge or outbreaks in some different kind of context. So I'm sure there's a lot of applications that many of our industry partners may be able to utilize some of this technique. And the second theme of second research focus is in proposing for a new security assessment tool. So, I mean, we have seen also it's speculated the new generation of cyber threats will increasingly leverage AI to launch attacks. So AI can be used as a background technique to gather more relevant information about target machines or targets, or AI can be actually embedded as a part of attack to make the attack be more sophisticated or to be hidden. So this type of AI-powered attacks are increasing, and we want to see whether our state-of-the-art and our newly emerging defense technologies are effective against this emerging AI-powered threats. But unfortunately, the existing security assessment tools cannot effectively evaluate the trade-off between the attack and defense, especially AI is incorporated. So we are looking at different types of assessment tools, and then game theory has been actually raised as above among all other tools, and because it offers quite a large set of different features and quite flexible in defining strategies and players and things like this. So we've been actually looking at how we can use the game theory as a security assessment tool to figure out the effectiveness of some kind of defense technologies. So we've been working on two different types of case studies. One where attackers use AI to find the shortest path to find the target machine quickly, and also we can looking at the attackers utilizing AI to launch botnet attacks, and been evaluating the effectiveness of some of the state-of-the-art and newly emerging defense technologies. And then we are actually making some proposals of guidelines of what kind of features should be contained in a defense technology. Of course, I think the industry also understood the importance of AI-based security assessments tool. And only a couple of weeks ago, the Microsoft actually released this AI assessment security tool called the Counterfeit. And then we are planning to actually investigate on this tool and find the pros and cons compared to game theory. So we have some expertise in security assessments too. So if there is any industry that thinking of buying and already bought AI solutions and want to find out the effectiveness of this new purchase, then we can help with that. And we have some capabilities in also helping with the vulnerability and the penetration testing aspect as well. In our last theme, so we're also building also how actually improve resilience on our response systems. So we are looking at what would be the effective tool for the malware classifications. So many existing deep learning techniques at the moment, to make them work well, that it normally require a huge number of data inputs that has to be thousands of millions. But you know, in cybersecurity, one of the problems that we have is we don't have many data malware samples. So does that mean we can't use the deep learning technique to do malware classification? So again, the community has recognized these requirements, and then there has been a new proposal of a new types of deep learning that can actually work on a smaller sample, and it's called the Siamese neural network. And this particular deep learning network can train in a small sample, especially the pair of samples, and then it's very good at spotting the differences and similarities between a pair of samples, hence the name Siamese neural network. So we've been investigating this Siamese neural network in the context of how we can effectively do the malware classification. And then we come up with a new architecture, and then we implemented one, and our result shows that Siamese neural network can be used in classifying the malware into to map into whether it's a new kind, whether it's belong to similar to one of the existing malware family, or this is a new type of malware that we can actually that we need further investigation. So if I think we are interested in finding our industry partners who are willing to try one of these research ideas I presented, or simply wants to enhance their postures in cybersecurity defense, that I think also if someone is looking for any new ideas for a startup and commercializations, I'm sure I think we have some exciting ideas around here. And that summarizes my my very brief summary of some of the work that we do. And we want to thank you for the MB to support the grant to carry on this exciting research. And I want to thank my local New Zealand and Australian partners. They give very valuable input and advice on our research. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julian. That's absolutely, it's covered an enormous amount of ground there, and the number of different use cases that you could have to apply this. There are obvious real world examples that are happening at the moment. We have got some we've got some questions coming through. They're good questions. Some of them are more general, so I might. We'll answer the general ones, but we might do them at the end after the presentations. There's a specific one around the presentation, and it is what type of input data is used for the Siamese neural network?
So we actually have worked on two sets of input data. So we have a strong collaboration with one of the research lab in South Korea. And this research lab is one of the biggest in the world. And then they actually have a live malware samples they collected from their Android phone, because Samsung is one of the biggest phone manufacturer. And then this lab works closer with Samsung. So we got given, I mean, we've been shared this Android malware samples. So we've been using that. But also there's a public data set called, so it's a public data set we downloaded from the virus total. So this is one of the biggest malware repository that a lot of malware researchers they use. So anyone interested in the malware research study, that there's a malware, the publicly available malware sample that anyone can download.
Really cool. Thank you very much, Julian. That's absolutely absolutely fantastic. Now, keep the questions coming if people have got them, and if you think about one after a presentation has come through, then we can we can always loop back. Now, coming up next with our presentations, we have Vimal Kumar, who's a senior lecturer at Waikato Uni. Now, Vimal, you're going to be talking about something that has quite a direct implication for things, and certainly myself as a long-standing technologist and someone that's been operationally responsible for large and complex networks, I would love to have had access to your research, and I'm very much looking forward to it, being I was going to say commercialized, but not necessarily commercialized, but certainly realized. Do you want to bring up your slides and go from here?
Yes, thank you, Declan. I'll share my slides, and then I'll go through what I have. Cool. Are my slides visible to everyone?
Yes.
Great. Just a moment. Great. Right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Declan, and good afternoon, everyone. So our project is AI for Human-Centric Security, and this is part of the same large cybersecurity research program that we all are part of. Now, generally, when we talk about human-centric security, in most of the work and tools that we look at, the humans that people talk about within security are the end users, which is great that people are thinking about end users. But in our work, the people that we are thinking about, lost my mouse pointer, happens fairly regularly. In our work, the people that we're thinking about are the security engineers and the network engineers and the day-to-day work that they do. So they are the humans that we're concerned about. And so the project is about using automation, in particular AI, to create tools that will enable the human in the loop, our security engineers, our network engineers, to be more efficient. So in particular, we are working on automating aspects of configuration management. Okay, so security misconfigurations are sixth on the OWASP top 10 list from 2017. And if you look at the misconfigurations, they affect every level of technology stack, right from the application, in fact, the business logic as well, and then application, and then your hardware, your software, your network, everything. So misconfigurations affect the entire technology stack along with the business process. So a large number of attacks that we actually see are successful. They can be traced to these misconfigured policies, this misconfigured software, hardware, network devices, and so on. So this is why we are particularly interested in looking at configuration security. And the challenge here is, how can we automate configuration management, certain aspects of configuration management, so we achieve better security and efficiency, right? So we're looking at things like adding a new configuration or adding a new policy for an existing device in a large and complex enterprise network. We're looking at things like adding a new device and finding a baseline, a secure baseline configuration. Or we're looking at implementing a new high-level policy on a large number of heterogeneous devices which come from multiple vendors, right? So how do we take that high-level policy, and how can we be sure that all the configurations that have been applied at the device level correspond 100% with your high-level policy? Or even the tasks such as querying the system for configuration-specific issues. You have an issue, and you know what that issue is, but you don't know what that translates to at the configuration level. And so a lot of people fall back on their experience. Okay, I've seen this issue before. I think this could be the problem with the configuration. So let me see what that configuration is. So, so is there a better way of doing this? This is what we're trying to investigate, and this is what we're trying to come up with tools that can help automates some of these configuration management tasks so we can have better security and the engineers can work with more efficiency. And this can be especially useful, in heterogeneous environments where you have hardware from multiple vendors, which are basically all our environments. So our entire work is divided into 3 different themes, so 3 different tasks. So we have configuration generation. So this is where we are trying to come up with a secure baseline configuration for a device that has to be added into the network. Then we have the AI for automation part where we are trying to use artificial intelligence techniques, deep learning, to automate certain aspects of that configuration generation. And eventually, explanation generation. We want our system to be able to provide information that can be given to various stakeholders at various levels who are the decision makers, and so they can see why a certain action was taken. So within each of these tasks, currently, what we are doing in the configuration generation task or theme, we're developing this tool, and we have created this proof of concept. This tool can translate high-level policy into low-level configuration mechanisms automatically. So we have this proof of concept, and so this allows us to implement a policy while being device agnostic. So it's in the proof of concept stage. There are certain parts that have been written specifically for our use cases, but we're working on developing this and making this a complete application. In the AI space, so this is our workflow. So what we're trying to do is, again, it's the same motivation. We're trying to go from intents at a very high level to policies and then to configuration. Now, Julian earlier talked about the data, the problem of data insecurity. Now, data is a big problem when it comes to AI, machine learning. Your model is only as good as your data. But when it comes to security, we don't have any data at all. So how can we use these new and fancy AI techniques if we don't have enough data to feed into our models? So Julian talked about the CME's neural networks, and the technique that we are looking at and we are investigating is called transfer learning. But it's eventually trying to solve the same problem. How can we use these new and really good AI models to do things when we have a lack of useful data? Right. So one of the things that we're doing is we're using these pre-trained language models. So these are natural language models and also models that work on programming languages. And these are really good. So we have these transformer-based neural networks and like GPT-3 or BERT, and they're really good. And what we want to do is we want to investigate how can we take something that these models have already learned and use that learning in a new task. Okay, so that is basically transfer learning. So we want to feed our intents to these pre-trained language models and see if that intent can be translated into a different language, which is our policy language. And then from there, see if that policy can again be translated into a configuration, which is again a different language. Okay? So, so this is what we're currently working on, and we have I wouldn't say results, but directions that look very promising. We're also trying to apply a similar concept to malware detection and malware analysis as well. We're not using the same GPT-3 and BERT transformers, but we're trying to see how can we apply the same concept on other security data and other security problems like malware analysis, so malware detection. So you take a pre-trained model, perhaps not a language model, some other model. What are the things that we can transfer, and how can we use those pre-trained models to a new problem domain? So that's what we're looking at in the AI for automation aspect. And finally, I hope this list of these video things are not blocking my view, blocking your view. They are blocking my view. The third thing is, we're creating these tools using AI, but we don't want these tools to be completely black box models, right? We want these tools to give us information on what they're doing and why they're doing this. So the third aspect is the explanation generation aspect of this project, where currently we're investigating various provenance techniques. So we have Spade, Camflow, and Progger that we have built ourselves. And we're looking at how these provenance generation techniques can help give us the provenance of what is happening with our system, why a certain configuration decision was taken. So that's the current state of our work. Let's go forwards, not backwards. Now, obviously, there are certain practical challenges with, as I mentioned before, the success of a project like this will depend upon the data that is used to build the system, right? We need data, and there is a lack of open configuration and policy data, which is not surprising. This is this is really sensitive information, and this is where we need help from our partners, potential partners. It is hard to generate this data synthetically as well, because we really cannot mimic the quirks that exist in actual enterprise networks. And then, that is one of the problems that we have. That is one of the challenges that we have. There's also a problem of practical evaluation of the techniques. Yes, we can do theoretical evaluation, but how do we practically evaluate any techniques that come out of this? Now, how do we know a configuration that has been produced by a model is secure? So we need people, we need eyes to look at our techniques and before actually implement. Obviously, if you can implement this on a system, then we can test it, but we wouldn't want to do that in a large enterprise network, something that's not untested, that is yet untested. And obviously, what is really important is the practitioner experience, the practitioner insight, which is very, very valuable, but not easily accessible. And what we want is we want to have a chat with you, we want to sit down with you and talk about this stuff and learn from your experience and from your insights, what kind of problems you face, where do you see this is useful, and where do you see other uses of something like this. So this is my call to action. Resources in New Zealand are scarce. So we want to collaborate. We will love to collaborate with you. And if you have any questions, anything, feel free to engage with us. Now, if you do want to come on board, the team that you will be working with is as Declan mentioned, Franz Tasman. On the New Zealand side, we have University of Waikato, which is the team is being led by me here. We have University of Auckland and University of Otago. So we have Giovanni Russello and David Ayers from Otago. On the Australian side, we have Data 61, University of Queensland, and Monash University, who are participating in this and engaged in various aspects of the project. So that's our project. That's me. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them now or keep them in the chat for later.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vimal. I certainly have a question. In modern networks are incredibly complicated. They're probably managed by multiple different vendors. There's a lot of different things at stake. What are the benefits that you see with this approach over the standard approach that people are seeing today with the current vendors and tools that are available?
Declan, so one of the things that you will see is that with the vendor supplied tool, the diagnostic tools that we have, they work well within their ecosystem, but they don't have a lot of visibility in the in other vendors' devices, right? So this is where we think an AI-based approach is better, which is not looking at the the things inside the devices, but the data that's coming out of the devices that is visible. So that's one of the benefits of this. Another benefit that we have here is because of the same advantage, that these tools will have the ability to find misconfigurations that have been missed by, usually the techniques that have been used previously are either rule-based or symbolic execution-based, and there you're getting what you code, right? So you can't really see things like, I wouldn't say 0-day, but things that you haven't seen before, right? So with AI, that gives us this capability of looking at stuff that may have been missed by these static tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of the configuration management systems and the secure configuration management systems that I've certainly come across are heavily focused on compliance rather than on security. And I think that having having this opportunity of using AI, it gives you the ability to tune what you alert to and what you're looking for to be sort of more focused back onto security, not necessarily because compliance is bad, but because compliance is slow. Compliance tells you what would have blocked an attacker 3 years ago when that was ratified, not what is affecting the threat landscape today.
No, that's absolutely true. And one of the places where it comes from is because it's really hard to translate from policy or from configuration to the actual mechanism. So you don't want to, if with such an opaque system, you don't want to do something that will break the system unless you're forced to by compliance. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a system that allows you to have the ability to query the system for misconfiguration, so that you don't have to worry about that black box nature of the whole configuration management stuff.
Mm-hmm. And we have a question from the floor, and the question is: I think we are excellent in policy, and we fail to collaborate once a security issue arises. How can we pivot the transfer learning?
That's a very, very deep question. I don't know. I don't think I understand. I completely understand that, where it's coming from, but
maybe it's a good research opportunity for the future.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we are looking at, as I said, extracting, querying the system, right? So so some of those techniques of querying what is wrong with the system based on what you're seeing at the high level would give us some of that ability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. This is, the operational management and the ongoing security management of complex organizations is probably one of the most difficult aspects of running modern technical organizations and keeping them secure and everything else that everyone has to do. And so it's wonderful. It's wonderful seeing this work done, and I certainly hope that I can roll it out and use it on one of my networks in the near future. So thank you very much. Next up, we have Stephen Galbraith. And do you want to bring up your starting slides there, Stephen?
Yeah.
This one is fascinating and terrifying. So I'm looking forward to the discussions afterwards. Stephen is he's a professor and the head of mathematics at Auckland University, and the quantum cryptography and the quantum world, it's something that's fascinated me from a very young age, trying to understand what it all meant. And I certainly won't say that I do or that I did, but it feels very much like quantum cryptography is a giant bus that's heading towards us very, very quickly, and we need to understand how we're going to approach it and what we're going to do. So I will let you go from here, Stephen.
Kia ora, thanks Declan. Thanks very much for the introduction, and kia ora to everyone on the call. Thanks for joining the session. Yeah, I hope to clear up all these things in 10 minutes. It should be no problem at all. So this also is part of this Trans-Tasman collaboration funded by MBIE. I'll talk more about the partners and how we're working as the presentation goes along. But really just to sort of say what I'm trying to achieve in this little segment, I'm really trying to raise awareness of the issues, share a few ideas about the current state and the future challenges. And it's an invitation to get in touch with us if you've got questions, obviously during the panel now, but also afterwards if you want to get in touch and find out more about this. And if there's opportunities for collaboration, then that would be fantastic. So cryptography is one of these things that of course is underpinning a lot of systems we use, but it's more or less invisible to the user. And of course that's a success. Successful technology becomes invisible and just works. So I think we all have some idea that there's various technical tools that are underpinning a lot of what we do on the internet and a lot of what's happening with information systems. Encryption, signatures, people are aware of what these things mean. But all of this at its core comes down to mathematics, and that's really where I come into it. And there's a relatively small number of mathematical problems that are being used, especially for public key cryptography, which is a lot of the things we need for internet systems. So we've got this whole edifice of information security built upon a relatively small number of cryptographic tools that are themselves built upon a very small number of mathematical or computational problems in mathematics. So there's an awful lot riding on this small number of mathematical problems. And that's fine at the moment, but unfortunately there's this idea of quantum computing. And this is a different model of computing. It's not the computers we're all using right now to watch this call. Different types of computing built on some different kind of fundamental concepts. And there's certain algorithms, there's something called Shor's algorithm, that will, it factors integers efficiently, it solves discrete logs, it really threatens the small number of mathematical problems that are the bedrock of information security. So everything we're using right now in this call is, well, not everything, but some of the components that we're using in TLS, for example, are not secure against an attacker with a quantum computer. So where do we go from here? There's various ways you can go from here. And one of them is called post-quantum cryptography. And the key feature here is that post-quantum cryptography is about mathematical problems and algorithms that will work on current computing devices. So these are things that will still run on your normal computer. They use the internet in the same way we're using the internet now. They use existing computing and communications technology. It's just the algorithms themselves that are changed and are secure against quantum computers. There's also other approaches that use quantum mechanics themselves as part of the defense, but that's not what I'm talking about in this project. So this project and this whole world of post-quantum cryptography is trying to give solutions today that work on cryptography, or that work on computers today. They use today's technology, today's mathematics, but they're secure against tomorrow's attacker with a quantum computer. So all this talk of quantum computers, are they real? Well, here's a picture of one. But which one, you ask yourselves? I think most New Zealanders can probably recognize Garage Project, and anyone with reasonable eyesight can read IBM. So I think you can probably work out the difference. So the point I want to make is that quantum computers are real. They exist right now in the world. So what's going on? Why are we still using traditional public key cryptography if IBM has a quantum computer? The situation is that the quantum computers that are being experimented with now simply are not big enough to break current crypto systems. And right now they're not even close. And there seem to be really some quite major technical problems to be solved before we're going to get a quantum computer that can factor the RSA moduli that he used in current systems, or break elliptic curve cryptography that's currently used. So, but they're definitely a real thing. Quantum computers, I mean, IBM has them, Google, Microsoft, D-Wave, there's various organizations that have these things, and we assume that various governments are developing them as well. So the big question is, one of the big questions is, when are they going to be scaled up sufficiently to break the current crypto systems in use? And if you look online, you'll see different estimates. Some people say 5 years, some people say 20 years, some people say never. At this point, it's very unclear, and I don't have much of an opinion on it. But what is clear is that you have to prepare for these kind of risks. It's like a global pandemic. You have to be prepared for these things, even though you're not sure when the next one's coming. So that's what's happening at the moment. There's a large community of researchers working on post-quantum cryptography. It's been a major research area for probably around 10 years. It's been around, people have been talking about it, but about 10 years ago, it really started to take up speed. And so what people are doing is they're working out good crypto systems that can be implemented on current computers, but are believed to be secure against an attacker with a quantum computer. And there's a standardization process taking place right now, led by, in fact, there's multiple ones around the world, but the highest profile one is being run by NIST. And it's fairly advanced. It's run like a competition, and people submitted various designs of crypto systems, and they've been whittled down. We're now in the third round, and they're expecting to have a standard 2024 at the latest. So it's a very active area. There's a lot of research going on to this. There's been huge innovations, even just over the last 3 or 4 years. Lots of new ideas have come out, and there's a reasonable variety of different types of crypto systems being developed. The point is, you have to work now. You have to start thinking about this stuff, even though the quantum computer is not available now. It takes a long time to migrate to new technology. So first, people have to do the research, figure out what works, what schemes are believed to be secure. They have to be standardized. Developers then have to go and implement the stuff. And then you have to really get the stuff rolled out in practice and everyone adopting it. And so, the timeline can be very slow. And as an example, I'll talk about TLS, which is a basic internet standard that we're all using all the time in all our secure communications. And there's been multiple versions of TLS, and TLS 1.2 was in use, and they developed TLS 1.3, which was launched in 2018. But it took 10 years. It was 10 years of development just to upgrade TLS to TLS 1.3. And you still have to keep TLS 1.2 supported for many years yet. I mean, they only just deprecated, this year they just deprecated the very first versions of TLS. So you've got that whole development timeline, and you've got to accommodate legacy systems. So you still have to support the old versions into the future. So the issue here with post-quantum cryptography is an uncertain timeline, a long development phase, a lot of difficulty in migrating to new systems. So what are we doing in this project? This is a big project with lots of partners, and we're interested in fundamental research, but we're also interested in raising awareness of the issue, creating partnerships, working on things that are relevant to industries in the local context. So at the research end, we've got working groups on various things like Internet of Things and zero knowledge protocols that are especially popular at the moment because of blockchain type applications. We've got PhD students, master's students, so we're training up a body of experts in this kind of field. And we're really interested in building partnerships to help shape the kind of questions that we are working on. So we're interested in your ideas about what we should be working on and what might be particular challenges in our communities. Here's a few of the folks that are collaborating in the project. Most of these people are in Australia. Felipe here is in Christchurch. He's on the call. Hey, Felipe. Clementine is also in Christchurch. So what are some of the things to talk about with us now and in the panel? the question is, how important is it for any company to think about this right now? For many people, it's not something you need to worry about. The big system designers and people who are providing tools will work through this stuff for you. But certain industries might want to start planning about this, have a look at which cryptography you're using, do some kind of risk assessment of what your threats are, how concerned you are about different types of attackers, especially maybe the difference between government attackers, malicious actors or other corporates, the different threat models. Whatever you do, don't roll your own crypto. Make sure you follow international standards and best practice. So I think there's general housekeeping that any organization could do to make sure they're compliant with the latest things in cryptography, and having a bit of a look ahead to post-quantum is a good idea. One of the buzzwords is crypto agility. So just having systems that allow you to quickly substitute in new technologies if you need them, systems where you can migrate new changes very relatively easily. That's a good thing to aim for, of course. Other opportunities, I suppose, are opportunities to form collaborations and partnerships, opportunities to have some kind of influence over the kind of research we're doing, opportunities to co-design systems or to generate new intellectual property. We're very keen on that. There's a white paper that the project has developed called The Quantum Threat to Cybersecurity. It's going to be published by Data 61. It's not up just yet. If you're interested in getting a copy, you can email me. My email address is about to come up. So thanks for watching, and back to you, Declan.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That's absolutely fascinating. How do I put it? I feel a little bit relieved, but not really. It's very, very interesting. Your point about what do people need to do now. I would imagine that anyone that had a long time value of their data, so that data, they needed to have either assurance or confidentiality of that data for a long period of time, and they had no control over who accessed that data. They would be the systems that I would be concerned about the most. Any form of cryptocurrency comes to mind instantly, but I'm sure that there are a lot of other kinds of things. One of the interesting things, I mean, you mentioned that a lot of the publicly known quantum computers are not capable of meaningfully attacking standard cryptography. There's a lot of work to be done, and there are some large challenges there. With that, taking that into consideration, do you think that it's a little bit early to start developing these standards, or do you think that we should sort of wait a little bit longer, or how do you think we should play that as a community?
Yeah, one of the issues is that the fundamental research is still very active in this regard, and of course, all the stuff we're talking about with security, information security, there's always a bit of an arms race, and as you pointed out yourself, Declan, the ransomware people are getting a huge amount of capital investment from people paying ransoms. They're actually quite well-funded research institutes in their own regard. So there's always an arms race. There's always huge progress being made by attackers, as well as progress being made by designers of systems. And this is absolutely playing out in post-quantum cryptography as well. There's a huge increase in focus on this topic in the last 10 years. That includes people designing systems, but it also includes people breaking systems. I mean, there's honest breaking and there's malicious breaking. I mean, as academics, I'm very interested in breaking things when they're still at the conceptual stage to try and clear the way, and the ones that survive are the ones that we end up deploying. That's how cryptography goes. But you're right that there's still a lot of uncertainty. We rely, as I said, we rely on a relatively small number of basic mathematical concepts for current cryptography. And moving to the post-quantum world, it will be the same. There will be a relatively small number of basic kind of mathematical principles or techniques that are being used to sort of build up an edifice of secure systems. And if any one of them, you know, if we start relying on one of these things and then it falls over because of either an academic attack or an attack by government researchers or whatever, then we put ourselves at huge risk. So is now the right time to be coming up with standards, or should we in fact be waiting until the research has advanced a bit further? I mean, there have been exactly these discussions in the NIST standardization process. There was some quite good, there was a first round where you had to submit the proposals, and those are the ones that are under consideration. And that's going back already about 3 years. And there's been some quite nice schemes that have been invented since then that are excluded from the standardization process because they were not submitted in the first round. Whereas if you were opening a standardization process now, you might put them in. So is it too soon to be developing standards for this stuff? Maybe. On the other hand, you kind of have to be prepared. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to be a bit of a moving target. There'll be some draft standards. They'll have a lifetime, or they'll do until maybe a subsequent rounds, which is like what you see with TLS, right? There's a TLS 1.3 now. I guess there'll be a TLS 1.4 one day, and there'll be a TLS 1.5, and we will have to migrate.
Yeah. I have one more question, and I think I already know the answer, but it is an interesting discussion point, especially given the consideration of the fact that it is a technical arms race. If we think about the decentralization of data and the transfer of systems, if we think about the use of cloud computing, everyone's data and everything that everyone relies on is at arm's length. Well, at a point where someone does develop a quantum computer that is capable of breaking RSA or, you know, doing this kind of factoring or anything else, how would we know?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't, right? Necessarily. I mean, if someone breaks elliptic curve discrete logs, then the first thing they might do is steal everyone's Bitcoins. On the other hand, if you actually did steal everyone's Bitcoins, probably the value of Bitcoin would plummet, and what you'd stolen wouldn't be very useful. So I don't entertain myself by thinking about the best strategy of how to extract wealth from things. I mean, I presume people have thought about this kind of thing before. I think you're right. I think you could, depending on who you are, if you're a government, you would probably use this to selectively extract secrets, government level secrets or commercially sensitive information. And it might be a while till people realize this has taken place. If you're a hacker, you're probably trying to on-sell something, so you might find out a bit more quickly. An interesting question, I suppose, is whether governments are likely to be substantially ahead of industry in this regard. And, you know, the world's changed, right? If you go back to the early days of cryptography, I mean, really, if you go back to, you know, the period of World War II and, you know, Bletchley Park and that kind of thing, it's quite clear that you've got a center there with the best brains and the best resources. I mean, Google is one of the biggest players in quantum computing right now. Can you argue that there's a nation that has bigger brains or bigger budgets than Google? I mean, in principle, Chinese and the US do, but I don't know. I suspect Google recruits more easily than the NSA and, at the moment. So it's not clear that there's anything at government level that's actually ahead of what we're already seeing in the public space. But again, that's, you know, your mileage may vary on that point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is absolutely fascinating, and I just want to have a huge thanks to everybody. Whilst I'm about to do that, feel free to throw in any last minute questions that you've got. There was one question that came through early on, and I said that we would answer it at the end because it is more of a generic one. I'll stop turning. I have the Q&A thing over on another screen. I'll bring it forward so I don't look like I'm being rude. And the question is, why has the rate of serious attacks materially increased globally in the last 12 months? And does this suggest the attackers are becoming more sophisticated or the defenses are becoming weaker? I started my journey into the information security space 20 years ago now. I spent 10 years doing offensive security, penetration testing, and then red teaming and other bits and pieces. And I can categorically say that defenses are becoming harder, systems are becoming stronger. It is technically much more difficult to compromise an organization than it used to be, barring things like a terrible password. Although even that, we've recently, so you see all these sorts of trends going back and forth. I think there's been a couple of very, very critical changes in what information security means and the economics of information security. What we have seen over the last 4 years is a massive amount of money going into the organized crime associated with cybercrime. It went from being governments and interested parties to a $1 trillion business. I made that number up, but huge. So if you track some of the large ransomware crews, they're pulling in over $100 million US per year with the different campaigns. These are not large groups. They don't have big costs. There's only so many Maseratis you can buy. All of this money has to go somewhere, and a lot of it is going back into things. And I almost think of it as being peak capitalism, where people will seek to extract value out of anything that they can do. And through the rapid exchange of value through cryptocurrencies, I'm not blaming it, but it has enabled the transfer of wealth very, very rapidly. It's the money that has meant that the attackers have been able to be much more dedicated, much more sophisticated about things, pulling apart the different crime gangs and everything that I saw in my previous role as the Deputy Director for CERT. We could see how well organized these people were. Their organizations, these people have to go to work. They have PowerPoint slides like everybody else. They've got targets that they've got to go to. They've got SLAs that they've got to meet. All of the fun stuff that we love, they have to deal with as well. And we've just seen the kind of the industrial revolution of hackers. And you don't have to go back all that far before it really was about, the curious kids and all of that kind of stuff. And it's just not the case anymore. And I think that's why we've seen that that material impact over the last 12 months. And unfortunately, I think that there is work to do to stop that from happening further, which is a whole topic of conversation in itself. But one thing that I do know is that there are some really, really important things that we've dealt with today. Probably three of the most interesting problems and how people are solving it, and what we can do about it, and everything else. So I really encourage everyone that is that has watched this today, if there's something about this that's interested you, get in touch. If there's something about it that you think could apply to your organization, get in touch. Vimal was talking about how hard it is to get real configurations to analyze. Julian was talking about where to get the different types of malware, the different models that they can use. How does this sort of work in real life? The value of powering this academic research is having that applicability in real life for organizations. So be a part of it. The whole purpose of this is to open up this collaboration. So we've got, we don't have any more questions coming through. We've gone just over the hour. So unless that there's anything else, I sort of open it up to the panelists. If there's anything else that people want to say, and I open it up to others if there's some questions that they want to ask.
I'd just like to thank you very much, Declan, for the hosting it, but also just like to acknowledge that Giovanni's not here. So the project is really, the main director is Giovanni Rossello, and he would have been giving a bit more of an overview of the whole project and how it works, and saying exactly the kind of things that you just said, Declan. So so thanks for filling in his shoes, and sorry that for the participants that you didn't get the full Giovanni experience, because I mean none of us can measure up to that.
Yeah, very, very much. There are very large shoes to fill. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks. So, oh, hang on a sec. We've got one sneaky question. Is it difficult to get malicious software or data sets, trace file, etc., to study due to the ITS policies in place of study universities, etc.?
In a way, yes. I mean, yes. So I mean, but there has been a lot of, so I think a lack of data set has always been recognized in academics. So there are actually a number of academics solely actually focusing a lot of their effort actually collecting really good high value data set and willing to share with a lot of academics. So because of their efforts and that there are actually, I think, doing something like deep learning based malware tracking and things like become a lot more active because of the generous donation of this publicly making a lot of data sets available. So I mean, and also, so I mean, I don't feel, I mean, yes, about maybe 5 years ago, that it was really difficult to find a good set of data sets to conduct academic study. But at the moment, I think there are lots of really good the data sets that's available to do initial study at least. Of course, I think, and then just to checking whether your model is correct, performance is good, and all this kind of thing. And of course, so normally when you do research, our first stage is always using publicly available data sets to validate your models are correct and accuracy is kind of working. But always the second stage is important that we work with the industries with the real data to find any biases in our approaches.
So I'd like to add to that. So one of the difficulties that we have found in publicly available data sets is that when I'm talking about malware samples, is that these malware samples that are publicly available tend to be old. And so what happens is with that is if you're trying to execute it and get some information, the C2C server is already shut down. And so the malware doesn't do what it's supposed to do because there's no C2C server. So for us to be able to execute the malware and dynamically observe what it's doing, the C2C server has to be there, which is quite tricky to actually to get going in itself. But if the C2C server is not there, the malware just sits there, doesn't do anything. You can't observe it. There's no information you can get out of it. So sort of the samples have to be reasonably recent for them to be working. Yeah, so that's so there are some publicly available data sets out there, but if you're, say, for example, doing dynamic analysis and you're trying to observe them, then it becomes a really tricky problem. They have to be really recent. The ones that people are uploading right away on VirusTotal, ones that are there with the anti-malware company, but then it's not really, it's really hard for us to get that malware because get that data set, because that data set has competitive advantage to whoever has that data set.
I think we have one more question coming through. If anyone's got any other questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A box as well.
So there's a question on the Q&A. Are there going to be future panels outside of Techweek? So we do have plans of organizing HUIs and other events where we discuss our work and the progress that we have made on a periodic basis. So yes, there are plans.
maybe to add to that, I think if you want to get added to the mailing list for the project, Kashala was be sending an email. I think she's sending an email to everyone who registered for the event, and she'll give you more ways of getting in touch and following us.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. If there's nothing else that, no other questions on everyone.
There's still a question in the chat, I think.
It's hard to get realistic network traffic with privacy concerns. Is there a body which is working out ethics around obtaining realistic data, like from real people that opt in?
It's hard to find people like you, but I think that is mostly an ethics problem to be sorted out between the person, if there's a project going on, and between the organizer of the project and the people who are willing to participate in that project. We don't have one going on right now, but if we have more people like you, we should do this.
Yes, exactly. That's why we are doing the opening up this conversation to find the partners who are willing to share their live data sets.
I know of some private organizations that have things like that. I'm fairly certain. I know that SANS Institute used to have a program where people could send their internet logs to the SANS Institute, and I know that there are some threat intelligence and threat response companies that have free opt-in things where you receive threat intelligence if you give them information, all of that kind of stuff. So there are some things around if people want them. There's a question that's come up. This is probably one for you, Vimal. What are your thoughts on better designing configuration management tools that are usable?
So one of the issues that we're focusing on is around heterogeneity of devices. So there are configuration management tools, from Cisco, from Juniper, and all these various vendors, and they only have visibility in their tools. So if they're doing a agent-based approach, then you have to have that tool, that agent installed on all of their machines, and you don't get to install that on the other vendors' machine. It comes bundled with, it's the software that comes bundled with the tool, with say Cisco's tool or Juniper's tools or devices. So I think that is the problem that we're trying to focus on how can we create something that has visibility across the entire network rather than just a particular vendor. And there are tools that claim to have some visibility, but they're not, from what we have seen, they're not that effective. And there may be other issues as well, but this is one particular issue that we are focusing on. And
I think,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that there's some very important user experience stuff in terms of to make a tool useful. My observation has been, in an operations manager, network manager kind of role, a lot of these tools can be very good, but are resource heavy. A huge amount of operational resources go on into maintaining them. And that is very, very difficult. And the other issue is that you get information overload very, very quickly. And so if you put in a configuration management tool, let's say you've got, 1,000 or 2,000 hosts in your environment, it's a sort of a medium-sized organization, and it comes back with 5,500 things to investigate. Where do you start? A lot of the time the diamonds get lost in the coal, and I think that again this is another reason why you know, the work that you're doing, Vimal, is so critically important, because, you know, sometimes we know the answers. If you bite it down into little tiny chunks, we know the answers to all of these things. If you look at one configuration for one device and you look at it, you go, you can see it. You can see, yep, this is wrong and that's wrong and this needs to be that. But you multiply that out by 1,000 or 10,000 devices, and it's not possible to do that kind of thing, especially when, you know, your business is selling widgets, or, you know, moving people from one side of the planet to the other, or whatever it is that you might be doing. You know, no one has the resources. It's just not compatible with the modern economic efficiencies that organizations need to do. So making sure that configuration management tools are written in the context of the amount of time each day that the customers that use it can afford to spend on it is critically important.
Yeah, and I agree with you. So there has been some recent work in this area where I was mentioning about querying, the ability to query a certain type of problem. So people are focusing in that area, and that's one of the things that we are doing as well, where given a certain problem, to what fine-grained level can you query where that problem is? Obviously, you don't want to get 5,000 hits, and that is where the challenge is. So there are new, very recent work in this area where people are coming up with tools. But the question is, you know, what is the amount of data you're getting back from your query?
Yes, so no, it's not questions. I just want to go back to these questions about how we obtain a realistic network traffic. So also I just want to point out one of the techniques also we use in academics. So because of the ethics and privacy issues, we can't use the raw data set. So often what we normally do, but also we want to get a sample that as realistic as possible. So we don't want to get a traffic data from the simulated environment, which we often do. But so what we normally do also, because a lot of data, this public data says that actually this data sets are obtained from the realistic traffic, but it's anonymized. So any sensitive information, they can identify the critical information about the person, individual, or company. That's all removed, so that this and this is so that's how we conduct research, and it's still avoiding ethical issues that we are still working on as realistic samples as possible in our research. So our research is not so far away from reality. So I just wanted to mention.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Just one more thing coming through. Yeah, Kashalu, do you want to go through that quick summary there?
Hi, I'm in the background. Hi, everyone. So I am the CSRP, that's an acronym for the program, and I run all of the background stuff. So you'll get a lot of emails from me, or probably already have. I was just asking everyone if they wanted to just give a quick program overview, considering Giovanni's not present at the moment. So just a quick, I guess, summary is that this is a 3-year program. So we've really just kicked off this year. And we'll be running through a whole host of workshops and networking opportunities till 2023. And so there are lots of opportunities for everybody to sort of, even if you're not sure, just to hear it out, see where we're at, and then join at a later point. So if you did want to know more, we've got some newsletters coming up with sort of our outcomes that we're achieving, what sort of events we've had, and media coverage as well. And so I do sort of say, subscribe, and if it all becomes too much, you're welcome to unsubscribe as well, but we won't overwhelm you.
Magic. And we've got one last question. And this is, how well does the data sanitization work for people that are submitting information? I can certainly talk from my experience on this, is that it's generally good, but not always. You can often find information inside indicators of compromise that are extracted out of things, or personal information to do with things. An example of something, I did a lot of research into phishing emails and phishing kits and all of that kind of stuff. And oftentimes we would find personally identifiable information encoded into URLs and requests and all sorts of other stuff. So you need to treat it with sensitivity. Certainly, if you're dealing with fresh malware, there is a lot of malware, probably a surprising amount of malware, although there might be bias in the data that I had, that is, reasonably targeted, or it has stuff in it, or it will be looking for things or gathering bits and pieces that are associated with PII. Other people's mileage may vary, and I certainly open the question up to the panel, but to specifically answer that, yes, it is tricky.
Definitely. I mean, even though I mentioned about data anonymization, data sanitization, so yes, this is one mechanism that can also use to avoid any privacy and ethical issues. But as Declan said, yes, there's no silver bullet that we just can say 100% all anonymized data sets is safe. But that's why one of the very big research area is in securing about data anonymization and privacy preservation techniques to make our sanitization algorithms more secure and robust.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. And Kushala will no doubt be in contact with everyone, and you'll be able to follow on to things and keep going, and hopefully we'll see you at a future panel. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you
all. Thanks, Declan.
Thank you, everybody.